TV sucks the brain right out of the skull. So, next seminar, we'll probe the content of television.
Professor McClure,
well, of course, the content of television is movies, but the message of television is what it does to us, the users.
Are you saying that the medium is more important than the message it carries?
No. The medium is not more important than the message. It's obvious. The medium is the message.
The medium is the message? What does that mean?
Well, of course, the medium is the message. It's what
He's full of great ideas.
Like print changed the shape of the world, people remember? Don't read newspapers, they get into them like a warm bath.
This Canadian changed the way the world thinks about communications.
If is the message, then the content must be the audience. And of course, electronic information is turning the world into a global village.
Gama Sutra, a guide to ending gamers. Whether it's in the concluding chapter of Ian Bogust's How to Do Things with Video Games, The End of Gamers, Dan Golding's more recent blog on the subject with the same title, oddly enough, or the hundreds of tweets being written about it, we're seeing calls to do away with the concept of gamers altogether. This is great, but this change isn't going to happen automatically. It is absolutely not inevitable. As such, I'd like to postpone our backpatting and think about solutions for bringing this change about sooner than later. We can't just Twitter blog the problem away. We listen to those who are less privileged than we are, and we don't adopt a default stance of skepticism towards the views and claims. We don't ignore it when institutions fail to do these things. We each proudly claim the label of social justice warrior. We stop upholding fun as the universal, ultimate criterion for a game's relevance. It's a meaningless ideal at best and a poisonous priority at worst. Fun is a neurological trick. We don't afford any credence to the idea that games are just for fun. Games are not neutral. Anita Sarkeesian is not imposing her feminist values onto games. Discovering the values expressed by games is a responsible thing to do. Discouraging that practice is cowardly. We need to regularly compare our games' expressed values to our own real values.
No way this could go wrong at all. So, how about it? Got any good GamerGate stuff for me tonight?
Oh, yeah. How do you know the GamerGate is dead?
I don't know. How do you know the GamerGate is dead?
The reproductively inactive workers are able to become reproductive again.
What?
Hey, why did the GamerGate cut off her sister's thoracic Jimmy?
What?
They aggressively broadcast competitiveness and reproductive viability.
Oh, I see what's going on here. I brought the wrong sock puppet. This is the fact sock puppet for the GamerGate ant. I should have known by the antenna. Those actually weren't even jokes. Don't you know any actual jokes?
Okay. How did the immature worker become dominant in the colony?
I don't know.
They slept with an IGF judge.
No more of that. I think we've all had it up to here with controversies. And no more tonight, and no more collusion. I know a lot of people like to make accusations about award shows that you have to sleep with the right people to win, and I want to assure everybody that's not the case tonight.
Gama Sutra. Gamers don't have to be your audience. Gamers are over. Games culture is a petri dish of people who know so little about how human social interaction and professional life works that they can concoct online wars about social justice or game journalism ethics, straight-faced. You don't want to be divisive? Who's being divided except for people who are okay with an infantilized cultural desert of shitty behavior and people who aren't? What is there to debate? When you decline to create or to curate a culture in your spaces, you're responsible for what spawns in the vacuum. That's what's been happening to games. That's not super surprising, actually. While video games themselves were discovered by strange bright outcast pioneers, they thought that MUDs would make for amazing cross-cultural meeting spaces. The commercial arm of the form sprung up from marketing high-end tech products to early adopters. You know, young white dudes with disposable income who like to get stuff. But it's unstoppable. A new generation of fans and creators is finally aiming to instate a healthy cultural vocabulary, a language of community that was missing in the days of gamer pride. This means that over just the last few years, writing on games focuses on personal experiences and independent creators. It's not about being a reviewer anymore. It's not about telling people what to buy, it's about providing spaces for people to discuss what and whom they support. These straw man game journalism ethics conversations people have been having are largely the domain of a prior age when all we did was negotiate ad deals and review scores and scrape to be called reporters because we had the same powerlessness complex as our audience had. Now part of a writer's job in a creative, human medium is to help curate a creative community in an inclusive culture, and a lack of commitment to that just looks out of step. Like a partial compromise with the howling trolls who've latched onto ethics as the latest flag in their onslaught against evolution and inclusion. Developers and writers alike want games about more things, and games by more people. We want, and we are getting, and will keep getting. We will get this because we're creating culture now. Gamer isn't just a dated demographic label that most people increasingly prefer not to use. Gamers are over. That's why they're so mad. These obtuse shitslingers, these wailing hyper-consumers, these childish internet arguers, they are not my audience. They don't have to be yours. There is no side to be on, there is no debate to be had. There is what's past and there is what's now. There is the role you choose to play in what's ahead.
Yeah, if I can say so myself, I think the editorial I wrote did catalyze it. It was like throwing a match onto a pile of kindling and lighter fluid. Again, this tension has been going on in the video games community for some time, where game developers have been sort of risk-averse and constricted to making and marketing to the same people. Now we have a confluence of industry factors where they no longer have to do that, and there's a broadening bench of representation of criticism and more creative freedom for developers to work in different fields and to express, different qualities through their work, and I've been writing about that. When I observed the harassment of her, I became frustrated at what I perceived to be the terroristic dominance of traditional appetites in what should be a diverse and creative field. And the thing that I wanted to say was to tell game developers, I didn't write that article for gamers. It was like I pulled on this little thread inside myself. I found a thread and I pulled until the entire thing had come apart. And I knew that games were not going to have a healthy creative community or a desirable culture or a meaningful role in the world's media landscape at all until we could address diversity problems and inclusivity problems and all these other problems that come from games' origin as these hyper-masculine capitalistic technology products. So in addition to regularly writing and speaking about feminism, I reject as much as possible conventional models for video games writing. No pretense of being unbiased. I write about the things I'm interested in, the creators I care about, and the trends that I want to see succeed. Sorry, that's the conspiracy. To advance amazing creators and conversations that I think matter to games. Yeah, I have an agenda, sorry. I did a feature for Nylon Magazine, for example, about Nina Freeman. She's an independent game developer. She makes these small games. She calls them vignette games, and they're about girlhood, for example. I did a piece for The New Inquiry about Merritt Kopas's Consensual Torture Simulator, which is about consent and embodiment in games, and it's a study on violence in games in an intimate context. I have a Vice column called Understanding Games, which is just stuff I'm thinking about.
Ars Technica. The death of the gamers and the women who killed them. Zoe Quin, Onita Sarkeesian. The tide of abuse first surged over Zoe Quin, creator of the game Depression Quest, who got a deluge of negative attention, abuse, threats, and harassment over the blog post written about her by an ex-boyfriend. Screenshots of several online conversations exposed many personal details about Quin irrelevant to her profession or professional conduct. Relationship with one Kotaku writer, Nathan Grayson, who quoted her once in an article and never covered or reviewed her game. Rumors circulated that Quin had alleged affairs with video game journalists which influenced coverage of her game. It's based on that. Quin began a relationship with Grayson sometime after he quoted her in an article. Phil Fish, the creator of Fez, tried to step in and defend Quin. After he received pushback, Fish threatened to cancel unnamed projects. Fish followed by announcing his Fez IP was for sale because he wanted out of the gaming industry. Sarkeesian's videos, which are extremely well-researched and insightful, always draw a measure of harassment and abuse from the stereotypical gamers, who are typically vitriolic toward issues of diversity. Many of the people slapping off Sarkeesian and Quin bind their arguments up in bigger issues. saying that Quin's situation shines light on ethical quandaries in games and gaming journalism. And Sarkeesian illuminates crowd-funded scams where social justice warriors cherry-pick evidence to undermine the massive business and culture of video games, rightfully owned by a particular kind of white man.
Online, they can take your character, lock them in place, have made their character pantsless, and then can simulate sexual assault with your character, and you are helpless to stop it.
The graphics are so good, this attack is eerily realistic, but this is virtual rape. Hackers rewriting codes and hijack Grand Theft Auto. The vile scenes are then posted to YouTube.
That's deplorable and should not be allowed anywhere. Like, they should be banned off the servers immediately.
Violence. In Grand Theft Auto, for instance, players carry knives and guns and they get away with looting and murder. But the sexual brutality now popping up online has the attention of Toronto police.
If people have experienced it.
In this scene, a dog has been modified to do disturbing things, and Detective Sean Marshall, who investigates cybercrimes, tells me this new trend is hard to label. A hacker could be next to impossible.
It depends on where the person is that's actually doing it, because they could be anywhere in the world.
Because of what she calls a misogynistic mentality that already exists in the world of gaming. And she says these new rape scenes only illuminate that.
It's violating, it's triggering.
Kotaku. We might be witnessing the death of an identity.
What a sad situation. I feel about being a gamer the same way I feel about being an American, incredibly proud and equally ashamed.
The Society of Professional Journalists #GamerGate #SPJ Airplay event in Miami, Florida was evacuated today after repeated bomb threats. According to event organizer and moderator Michael Kritsky, 6 bomb threats were directed at the event.
Polygon. Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quin and more take aim at cyber-harassment against women. The Broadband Commission Working Group on Gender gathered at the United Nations yesterday to present its findings on what they consider to be a rising tide of online violence against women and girls. Present at the event were game developer Zoe Quin and feminist frequency creator and industry critic Anita Sarkeesian, who took part in a panel discussion. Both Quin and Sarkeesian were among those called on to speak about their involvement with the UN Women's Coalition that was formed to reduce instances of gendered cyber violence.
I think it's important to recognize that harassment is, as someone had mentioned, it's not just what is legal and illegal, right? Harassment is threats of violence, but it's also the day-to-day grind of you're a liar, you suck, you know, making all of these hate videos to attack us on a regular basis, and the mobs that come from those hate videos, etc.
Time magazine. UN says cyber violence is equivalent to physical violence against women. The UN defines violence against women as any act of gender-based violence that results in, or is likely to result in, physical, sexual or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts. The report notes that cyber violence is an extension of that definition that includes acts like trolling, hacking, spamming, and harassment. The report also argues that cyber touch is recognized as equally as harmful as physical touch, suggesting that online harassment might be just as lethal as domestic violence or sexual abuse. Dead is dead, says Famzile Mlambongcuka, Under Secretary General of the UN and Executive Director of UN Women. Whether you're dead because your partner shot you or beat you up, or you killed yourself because you couldn't bear cyberbullying, or you were exposed to many of the sites that led people to suicide pacts, bottom line, we lose a life.
Motherboard United Nations apologizes for fault Ridden cyberviolence report. The report has been taken offline and will be released soon with corrections. Some of the citations were left blank, others provided definitions without citing the source, and one even cited a file on the author's own C drive. The report also cited a publication affiliated with controversial activist Lyndon LaRouche, who claimed a link exists between video games such as Pokémon with real-world killings. When I asked her what went wrong with the report, she offered an apology. I think it's just a product of the terrible scramble around the launch date. It was a hugely busy period for the UN. We apologize very much for the errors and I hope we'll be able to rectify them. Our priority is to get it back up in 100% correct state. What do they want to accomplish with the report? It is just to raise awareness, she said.
I'm going to show you a remix that I just finished this weekend and no one else has seen. One person has seen it. It's a soundtrack of one song, except I'm doing video games. So it's not exactly a fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this.
The Guardian. How can our future Mars colonies be free of sexism and racism? To paraphrase Douglas Adams, space is white. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly white it is. It's also very male and European. It's early days, but if we really want to create a progressive new world, then issues like these should be at the hearts of our efforts from the very start. I hope Musk and his peers open up that discussion sooner rather than later. The last thing we need is to wake up in 50 years and find that a bunch of GamerGate knobheads are running Mars.
The GamerGate controversy cost Gawker Media 7 figures in lost advertising revenue, the company's head of advertising Andrew Gorenstein said 3 hours after Gawker CEO Nick Denton sent a 4,000-word staff memo announcing a new management structure. The anti-feminist GamerGate movement, which accused Gawker Media of unethical journalism practices, began targeting Gawker's advertisers after Sam Biddle, then an editor at Gawker Media Silicon Valley blog Valleywag, tweeted an obviously sarcastic endorsement of bullying. Ultimately, #GamerGate is reaffirming what we've known to be true for decades: nerds should be constantly shamed and degraded into submission, Biddle tweeted on October 16. In response, GamerGate enthusiasts began contacting companies that had advertised on Gawker in the past and Gawker's ad tech providers, and succeeded in getting a number of former advertisers, including Adobe and Mercedes-Benz, to distance themselves from the company.
The Daily Dot. Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh's friend Mark Judge, the witness who Christine Blasey Ford claims was present when Kavanaugh allegedly tried to sexually assault her at a party in 1982, was a GamerGate supporter. Judge wrote a now-archived article in 2015 called Why GamerGate is Really About Political Correctness that resurfaced via Twitter on Monday. In the article, the self-described journalist blasted Feminist Frequency host Anita Sarkeesian as a bully and ranted about the influence of social justice warriors in the gaming industry. GamerGate, which began as a protest against perceived ethical failures in games journalism, was a storm of hate speech online that fueled mob harassment of several progressive women within gaming.
These are young men. Yeah. These are not old men. These are young men. How do you explain that?
I don't know where exactly to point my finger. I think there's probably an awful lot of factors that come together to shape societal behaviors, whether it's certain types of music. There's a lot of misogyny in certain types of music. There's issues around pornography and its prevalence now and its accessibility, which is something I'm really wrapping my head around as a father of kids who are approaching their teen years. And there's also just the shifting parental roles as well. There's a lot of communities in which fathers are less present than they have been or they might be in the past, and there's a more need to have engaged, positive role models.
There seems to be a lot of anger against not just women, but against feminism and feminists. Would you describe yourself as a feminist?
Yes, I am a feminist. I'm proud to be a feminist. Deeply grounded my own identity in that, and I'm proud to say I'm a feminist. And the things that we see online, whether it's issues like GamerGate and video games and misogyny in popular culture, is something that we need people to stand clearly against.
GamerGate to Trump. How video game culture blew everything up. What began as a backlash to a debate about how video games portray women led to an internet culture that ultimately helped sweep Donald Trump into office. Really. As we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love, America slid into a summer of hate. People threatened places of worship, defaced cemeteries, and intimidated others because of the way they look or dress. And a white supremacist march in Charlottesville, Virginia, heavily promoted on extremist websites, left 3 people dead. The web's role in recruiting people to hateful, extremist organizations is back in the spotlight. When it first happened, many of us were a little dismissive. After all, people on the internet are always mad about something. In 2012, it was the backlash against Anita Sarkeesian, a feminist media critic.
Go home, gamer girl.
What the hell is your problem?
You and your boss. Reina Punjabi only got this feminazi game made by being a slut.
What happened?
These guys, they just can't stand women in gaming.
What did they do to you?
They leveled up.
Considering the increasingly central role video games play in our society, Sarkeesian said she planned to create a series of 5 videos to look at how women are portrayed, from the damsel in distress to the sexy sidekick to the villainess and beyond. The trouble started soon after. The fundraising window overlapped with the 2012 Electronic Entertainment Expo, the video game mega-marketing event held in Los Angeles each year. She hit her goal in the first 24 hours. In the end, she'd raised more than 26 times what she asked for, tallying $158,922. But not everyone was applauding. An army of hateful trolls woke up, found each other online, and launched a crusade of harassment, targeting not only Sarkeesian but anyone else who questioned their view of how the gaming world should be.
Gary and Zach are sacrificial lambs crucified on the altar of political correctness.
So why should you care that people on the internet got angry? Because attacks on Sarkeesian marked the beginning of a cultural shift. Soon, the mob's attention turned to a world much wider than video games. Ultimately, some of them, like the popular right-wing commentator Mike Cernovich, moved on from GamerGate to attack presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. GamerGate was an excellent breeding ground and practice ground, said Soraya Kemley, director of the Women's Media Center's Speech Project, which tracks online abuse. Over time, different groups on the internet that tend to respond negatively to women, such as some communities of hardcore gamers, coders, and far-right white supremacist groups, began to coalesce around shared harassment of women and distaste for social change. In the case of GamerGate, the mobs coalesced around a particular hatred of what they saw as outsiders, women in particular, attacking video games, which they claimed was theirs. It's like staking your claim on a particular ideology or a particular view, said Paul Booth, who studies games and pop culture at DePaul University. Other views, other ideas, other people aren't allowed in. One way they spread their message is through memes, inside jokes, often in the form of images or GIFs. These bite-sized and easily shareable nuggets serve both as jokes and as a sinister megaphone. During GamerGate, a blacklist of publications was created, as were email templates and phone call scripts for how to most effectively convince companies to pull their ads from sites that wrote critically about GamerGate or its message. The mob scored its first victory when Intel pulled ads from the game news and reviews site Kamasutru after a write-in campaign from the mob. Next, the group pressured Adobe to stop advertising with Gawker Media after one of its writers posted critical tweets about GamerGate. Though these wins were short-lived, the trolls pressed on, encouraged by celebrities like former Breitbart editor Milo Yiannopoulos and actor Adam Baldwin, who criticized people like Sarkeesian and Quin. By the time the 2016 presidential election moved into its final phase, pitting Clinton against Donald Trump, these mobs' favorite tactics were well established. GamerGate was the canary in the coal mine, Wu said. Few predicted what would come next. Angry trolls sent vicious and often anti-Semitic messages to journalists covering Trump, accusing them of biased coverage. Memes about Clinton spread rumors about her health. But Wu isn't just accepting it. If the mission of these mobs is to silence people with different views, then they've lost when it comes to her. She's running for Congress in 2018 in Massachusetts. The only way forward she can see is changing the law. She intends to make that happen. For all the horrors that are going on right now, I think it's awakened literally millions of people out there in America to stand up and get involved and make a difference.
New Statesman America. Has Trump really alienated gamers? And will this affect him in 2020? I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts, Trump said. How does this particular carriage of the Trump train feel about the president's proposed regulations on violent video games? Is he going down, left, right, in their estimations? I'm pretty sure without Gamergate Trump would never have been elected. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you, wrote one commenter on Reddit's pro-Gamergate forum, Kotaku in action. If Trump significantly damages the gaming industry, it's easy to see how he could lose a crucial faction of supporters, costing him re-election. Everything, then, is yet to play for.